The cereal went soggy while I waited. I remember that detail with the specific clarity of someone who spent a long time afterward deciding which details were the ones that mattered: the bowl in my lap, the milk going warm in the October sun, the particular pointlessness of eating it anyway, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I was 11. I sat on the front steps of our rented house on Callaway Road in rural Indiana, and I waited for my mother to come back out and tell me she was joking. She didn't come back out. That's how I know it was real. I'm telling this from a distance now. 27 years old, and some things you can finally say plainly. They left. My father wrote the note, his handwriting, not hers, because she never liked writing things down. He'd used the back of a grocery receipt. There were a few sentences, and at the corner of the receipt there was a smudge that might have been from a coffee cup or might have been something else, and I spent approximately a year deciding it was the coffee cup, because getting that right felt important in a way I couldn't have explained and now can. The landline was already disconnected. I walked to the neighbors, the Pattersons, who grew pumpkins in their front yard and minded their business, mostly, and asked to use their phone, and Mrs. Patterson sat me at her kitchen table without asking questions while I called the one number I could think of. Uncle Ray lived in Columbus, Ohio. He was my mother's older brother. I had seen him 6 times in my life, maybe 7. When he answered and I told him what I'd found, he was quiet for long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "I'm coming." That was all. He said it in the voice of someone who had already decided, who had not needed to deliberate, who was in fact already in motion even as he said it. His headlights turned into the driveway at 2 in the morning. I was on the steps still, because I'd gone back there, because it seemed like the right place to be if someone was coming for me. He got out before the car had fully stopped. I remember the door opening while it was still rolling, the slight awkward jog as he got his footing. And he was 52 years old with a bad back and reading glasses pushed up on his head, and he walked up the path and crouched down to where I was sitting and held on. His breathing wasn't steady. He was trying to keep it steady, and it wasn't. I could feel it in his chest. That is the first time I understood that being loved by someone means sometimes you will feel the exact shape of their effort to hold themselves together for you. We drove through the rest of the night to Columbus. He had the radio on low. He asked if I was hungry. I said no. He stopped at a rest stop anyway and got me a peanut butter cracker pack and a bottle of water and put them in the cup holder without comment. He had not been consulted. He had not been expecting me. He had 2 cats and a small cream-colored house in Columbus and 16 years of a quiet life organized around his own rhythms. And then he had me, because my mother had left and he was the person I called, and he had said I'm coming without pausing to think about what it would cost. I know now what it cost. I didn't know then. I made myself easy to have around. This is something I understood instinctively, the way children who have been uncertain of their welcome always understand it. I did my dishes before he had to notice them. I folded my laundry on the day of. I didn't ask for things unless I was very certain the answer was yes. I read his moods at a distance and calibrated accordingly. I was quiet when quiet seemed right and present when presence seemed right, and I worked very hard at being the kind of resident you didn't regret. He noticed. He didn't say anything about it for months, which is how I know he was thinking carefully about how to say it. It was December, a Saturday morning. He made sourdough on Sunday mornings, but sometimes on Saturday too, if the week had been long. I came into the kitchen and the bread was already out and sliced, and there was real butter, the kind in the paper wrapper, and strawberry jam he'd put up himself from the back garden. He poured coffee for himself and orange juice for me without asking, because he had learned by then that I didn't drink coffee, which is one of those small accumulated things that feel enormous when you're 11 and unsure. He sat down across from me. He said, "You don't have to earn your place here." Just that, he didn't elaborate. He picked up his coffee with both hands. He always held his coffee cup with both hands. I noticed this for years. I could draw you the exact shape of it. And he drank it, and he looked out the window at the garden, and he let the sentence be what it was. I ate the toast. The bread was warm and the butter had melted into it, and the strawberry jam was exactly the right sweet. I don't know how to explain what it tasted like except to say that it was the best thing I had ever eaten, then or at any point since, and that some of what I was tasting wasn't the bread. I didn't say anything back. He didn't need me to. I grew up in that house. I understand that sentence more precisely now than I did when I was living it, when it just felt like the fact of things. The refrigerator had a book-shaped magnet he'd gotten somewhere, a library conference maybe, and every report card I brought home went up there. Not only the good ones, all of them, because he said the point wasn't the grade, the point was the record of your trying. I had a C- in 7th grade algebra that lived on that refrigerator for a full semester. Dana lived 2 streets over and thought almost everything was funnier than it probably was. I loved her for it with the specific gratitude of someone who'd been serious by necessity and needed a friend who wasn't. She came to dinner twice a week senior year, and Ray made enough food without being asked. The school newspaper happened by accident. I wrote a piece for the community section about the library's summer program, because Ray had suggested it and I'd had nothing to lose, and the editor printed it and I read it again in the physical paper and understood something I hadn't understood before, that there was a sentence in there, one sentence that made the whole piece make sense, that the work of writing was finding that sentence. I've been doing that work ever since. Ray kept a folder. I only found this out when I was helping him clear shelves before the move to the smaller house. Every article, hole punched and filed in chronological order, going back to 8th grade. He taught me things in the sideways way he had, not lectures, not sit-down conversations framed as lessons, just things said in passing that landed precisely because they weren't announced. How to read a lease before you sign it. How to decline something without qualifying the no until it stopped being one. He said once, coming back from a library conference where someone had apparently been unkind to him in a way he didn't specify, the ones who actually know you won't need to say it. I wrote that down in my journal that night. I still have that journal, green hardcover because I went through a phase. I had a number from my parents in Nevada for about a year. Someone had passed it through the family, the way information travels through families that don't communicate directly, sideways, through third parties. I called twice, both times voicemail. Then the number stopped working. My birthday in April came without a card and without a call, and I sat with that for a while, trying to find the accurate word for what I felt. Not sad, exactly. Sad is a shortcut. What I felt was invisible, like I existed fully only in the places where someone had chosen to look. Ray had looked. He had chosen to look every morning, over coffee and sourdough and report cards and algebra, and I did not know how to write what that meant, so I wrote around it instead, and hoped it would eventually become visible in the space between the words. It did. Ray cried when they called my name at graduation. I spotted him from the stage, 3rd row from the back, standing when he didn't need to stand yet, hand pressed briefly to his mouth. I almost lost it completely. Dana grabbed my hand without looking at me, which is what Dana always did, which is why I needed her. We went to the Italian restaurant on 5th Street afterward. He wore the blue shirt I'd given him for his birthday. He ordered us both dessert without consulting me, and when I gave him a look, he said, "It's graduation." Simple as that. The envelope had a check in it. More than I'd expected, more than he should have managed on a librarian's pension. And when I started to say something about it, he put his hand up and said, "College is close, so you can come home on weekends if you want." Not you should, not I expect, just if you want. The distinction was deliberate. He had always been deliberate. I came home most weekends, because I wanted to. He had the hip replaced finally at 63, 3 years after he should have had it done. He'd been putting it off in the way men of that generation put off medical things. Not denial exactly, more a kind of stubborn administrative procrastination. I drove him to every appointment. He protested this twice, and then stopped protesting it because he understood, I think, that I was not doing it out of obligation, and that I would have been insulted by the implication. The cats were Mabel and Chester. Chester was younger, easier, friendly in the open way of cats that have been loved without complication since kittenhood. Mabel was older and had opinions and distributed her affection on her own precise schedule. I had known both cats for years. I knew their habits. I knew that Mabel's schedule was in fact a form of love, just love with standards. The call came on a Tuesday at 11:14 in the morning. I was at my desk in Nashville. I'd been there 2 years by then, communications coordinator at a housing nonprofit, writing the kinds of sentences that made whole stories make sense in one line, which felt like the logical extension of everything. My colleague Priya was eating lunch at her desk, and someone in the back office was on hold with a printer company, and it was an entirely ordinary Tuesday. And then my phone rang and I walked to the parking garage and sat in my car and drove to Columbus. I don't remember the drive. I remember the parking garage at the hospital, the particular echo of it, the elevator buttons worn smooth. I remember the quality of the air in the room where he was. I don't know how to describe it except as heavy, like the room was holding something it didn't know how to put down yet. He had been gone about 40 minutes before I got there. I sat with him for a while. I talked, because it felt right to talk, because silence felt like abandonment and I had strong feelings about abandonment. I told him about the fundraiser we were planning, about the sourdough I'd finally gotten right, about Dana's new apartment in Columbus, about how Chester had apparently been sleeping on the couch in open defiance of the posted rules. I told him about the drive, about the particular flat gray of the November sky over the highway. I thought about the December morning with the toast. I thought about the report card magnet and the folder of newspaper articles. I thought about the ones who actually know you won't need to say it, and about how he had known me, really known me, in the way that is only possible if you have paid close and consistent attention for 16 years, if you have chosen every morning to pay that attention. He had made me. Whatever I was, the parts I was proud of, the parts I was still working on had grown in that house, against the trellis of who he was, in the soil of being consistently wanted. I sat there until the light in the window changed. Denise walked through the door of Patricia, Reeves's conference room, on a Thursday in January. I had not seen her in 16 years. I want to be precise about this. Not a card, not a call. There had been the Nevada number that stopped working. After that, nothing, a silence that had gone on long enough that I'd stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a sound that's been absent long enough. You don't forget. You just integrate the absence into your baseline. She was in a coat I didn't recognize. Gray wool, slightly too big at the shoulders. She was with a cousin I barely remembered, Stacy, a few years older than me, who had the look of someone who had been briefed on the situation and had arrived with a prepared opinion. Denise looked older in the way people look when 16 years have passed, and none of those years have been easy. She was my mother. I had her eyes. I had never particularly liked knowing that. Patricia Reeves had a careful voice and the practiced calm of someone who had guided many charged rooms to their conclusion without anyone bleeding. She directed us all to seats with the gentle authority of someone who knows that the most useful thing you can do in a fraught moment is give people something physical to do. Sit. Here is a glass of water. Here is where we are beginning. Denise placed her hand on the table. Not on mine, not reaching, not taking, just placing it there, near the space between us. I looked at it. I thought about what it would have meant to me at 11, sitting on the steps on Callaway Road, that hand placed near mine. I thought about how the thing we need and the thing we get are rarely the same thing, and how what matters is what you do with the gap. Patricia read the letter. It was not long. Ray had never been long when short was accurate. He had made provisions for the house, the garden, the cats. Dana was taking Chester. Per a prior conversation, and Mabel came to me because Ray had known what Mabel's schedule of affection really was. He left a sum to the Columbus Public Library System, and a sum to me and a note to his attorney to thank her for her patience over the years. And then the letter. Patricia read it in the same careful voice. It said, "Denise, I know you are there because you believe you have a claim. I want to be straightforward with you so there is no confusion after this room clears. I loved you. You are my sister and I loved you, and I know the years have been hard and I am not writing this to wound you." But Lizzie was present. She was present when she was 11 and frightened, and I drove through the night, and she was present when she was 13 and struggling, and I made her toast, and she was present at 17 and 22 and 26, and I was present with her every one of those mornings. Presence is not a small thing. It is in fact the whole thing. What I had to give, I gave to where I was. Stacy started to say something about fairness. Patricia redirected the room with the efficiency of someone who had anticipated this and had a plan. Denise didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm his sister." I looked at her. I had decided a long time ago on gentleness, not because she had earned it, but because I had watched Ray choose, for 16 years, never to say a cruel thing about my parents in front of me, and I had understood eventually what that cost him and had wanted to be that kind of person too. I said, "I know." She looked at the table. Her hand was still near mine, not touching. I thought about leaving it there, the gesture of proximity without claim. I thought about how much courage it must have taken to walk into this room. I thought about how courage in the wrong direction is still just motion. I didn't take her hand. I didn't move away from it. I let it be what it was. Patricia said a few closing things. We gathered our coats. The elevator in Patricia's building was old, slow, the kind with a panel of buttons worn smooth from years of use. I stood in it alone going down, and I thought about a January morning when I was 13. I had come to breakfast not quite right. I didn't know what was wrong exactly, just the particular heaviness of a bad night and an early morning and some accumulation of feeling I couldn't name. Ray hadn't asked me what was wrong. He'd made coffee, and he'd made my toast, and he'd sat down with the newspaper and waited, which I had understood even then was a form of skill, the knowing when to wait. And eventually I'd said, "Do you think they think about me?" He had put the newspaper down. He had thought before he answered, which he always did. Then he said, "That's their work to do, not yours." I said, "What's mine?" He said, "To know that the people who are here chose to be here." I had written that down too. Both of us in that kitchen, the January light coming in at the angle it comes in at in Columbus in January, which is low and gray and honest. He chose. Every single day he got up and he chose. The sourdough and the report card magnet, and the folder of newspaper articles and the envelope at graduation, and the way he held his coffee cup with both hands. 16 years of choosing. And I had chosen too, I understood now. I had chosen to come home on weekends. I had chosen to drive him to appointments. I had chosen to sit in that room in the hospital and talk until the light changed. We had made each other, in the way that people who choose each other make each other. The elevator reached the lobby. I walked to my car. I drove home. I'm in my apartment now. Nashville outside the window, the particular nighttime sound of the city, which I have learned to find comforting in the way you learn to find comforting the specific textures of the life you've built. I made tea. I got the journal green hardcover, and yes, I know, but some things you keep for continuity. I didn't write about the money. I don't care about the money, or I care about it the way you care about the acknowledgement of a thing that was true, which is different from caring about the thing itself. I wrote about the porch swing, repainted every spring, the yellow that the second coat of paint couldn't quite cover. I wrote about the screen door in summer, the particular sound it made. I wrote about the way the garden looked in August, everything green and organized and obsessively tended, Ray in his old hat with dirt on his knees. I wrote about Sunday sourdough and the bread that finally turned out right. I wrote about the folder in the file cabinet, alphabetical, hole-punched, 16 years of bylines from a girl who had learned that the work was finding the sentence that made the whole story make sense. Mabel came from the windowsill. She moved in the slow and deliberate way of a cat with opinions, settling onto my lap with the air of someone conferring an honor they had decided on previously and were now delivering at a time of their choosing. She arranged herself. She looked away. I put my hand on her back. She permitted this. He made me a home. I tried to be worth it. That seems like enough to say. That seems like the accurate thing.